Hi, everybody. I hope you're doing fabulously well. While I work on new episodes and to change things up a bit, I am thrilled to share this conversation I had with you with Victoria Moran on her podcast, Main Street Vegan. Victoria is a longtime friend. She's the author of 14 books, including her newest one, Age Like a Yogi, A Heavenly Path to a Dazzling Third Act. She's the founder of Main Street Vegan Academy, which trains and certifies vegan lifestyle coaches and educators. And it was a pleasure to chat with her on her podcast, Main Street Vegan, all about compassion in general, and my new book, A Year of Compassion, 52 Weeks of Living Zero Waste, plant-based and cruelty-free in particular. I hope you enjoy this episode. Don't forget to follow Main Street Vegan Podcast as well as Food for Thought Podcast. And for lots more inspiration and information about living compassionately, subscribe to my Substack, pick up your copy of A Year of Compassion, and of course, check out my upcoming all-inclusive vegan trips. All of this can be found at joyfulvegan.com. Now enjoy the episode.
Know how sometimes you just think somebody is so cool. It's the same feeling like back in high school, the cheerleaders. And then if you find that one of those people doesn't just look cool, but really is through and through and through, and they become your friend, it's just the best thing ever. Somebody like that is my guest for this hour. Hi, everybody. I'm Victoria Moran, host of the Main Street Vegan Podcast. What a pleasure to have you with us today. And guess what? Guess what? Guess what? We're going to be talking with one of your favorite people. Now, how did I know that? Because she is one of almost everybody's favorite people. Certainly, everybody who's vegan or veg curious and has been around this movement at all. We know that for nearly 30 years, Colleen Patrick-Goudreau's compassionate living philosophy has been propelling plant-based eating into the mainstream and forever changing how we regard animals and treat our precious planet Earth. Colleen is a recognized expert and thought leader on the culinary, social, ethical, and practical aspects of living compassionately, healthfully, and sustainably. She's the award-winning author of 8 books, including the best-selling The Joy of Vegan Baking, The Joyful Vegan, and her newest book coming up, A Year of Compassion, 52 Weeks of Living Zero Waste, Plant-Based, and Cruelty-Free. Welcome, Colleen.
Thank you, Victoria. It's such a pleasure to talk to you again.
Well, it's always such a pleasure to talk to you. And I remember the time that you were in New York and we were doing Main Street Vegan Academy in person, and you spoke in my actual living room. And I always feel that kind of the energy of things like that remain. And every now and then I'll walk in there and kind of see you up there in all your radiant glory, sharing with my students 10 or 12 years ago or however long it was. And now here we are together in cyberspace, and it's terrific.
I love it. Thank you.
So, you've got a very different kind of book. Tell us about it.
So it is different in the sense that, well, it's not a cookbook, so it's different in that way. And it is focused still on inspiring people, encouraging people, empowering people to live compassionately. That's always been my mission, and it remains my mission. And if there's another way to say it and do it to inspire people in a different way, I guess that's what this book is. I've been wanting to do more on compassion and really making compassion the center of this conversation. And I want to unpack that more because I don't think you even know this, that you were really influential in, I would say, even in the format, the birth of this book. And I'd love to unpack that more. But yeah, it's basically, kind of taking all of the ways that we have an impact in this world on the animals, on the planet, on ourselves, and putting it in one place to inspire people to eat healthier, to live more sustainably, to help animals more in all these different ways. But I would say it's not just throwing all of the things at the wall to see what sticks. It really is kind of focusing on what is the most impactful. What are the most impactful things we can do? And that's what this book is about. So it's 52 weeks of living zero waste, plant-based, and cruelty-free. And what I like about that is that each week I really want the reader to take time with that topic and focus on it, go deep, go there, as opposed to, every day having something different to do that will just be overwhelming, and I don't think it's very effective.
I like the weeks. I like it a lot. So let me ask you about this. I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here because we've known each other a long time and we can do that. Is it just too much? Sometimes I wonder if veganism is just too good, that it's like, well, it can't do all that. Or, oh my gosh, do I need to do all that? So you start with zero waste, which I think scares a lot of people. And
Mhm.
then, we're going to be plant-based and cruelty-free. Then you're scaring other people. How are you, how are you helping people expand themselves to be able to embrace something so beautiful?
Gosh, I would say it is expansive because I think that's what the effect of it is, because I do think it expands our hearts and our minds. I would say it's actually simplifying it because all of it is under the umbrella of compassion. And so, if we look through the lens of compassion, and this is where you come in, Victoria, because in our last conversation, I remember you asked me to just whittle down what compassion meant. You asked me to define compassion. And our conversation at that moment just really compelled me to identify what I think is the whole point of all of this, which is our interconnectedness. And that's what compassion is. Compassion sees ourselves as connected to everything else, like waves in the ocean. We are not separate from one another. And if our lens through which we see everything we do is compassion, that means the question we can ask every time is, how does what I'm about to do or buy or eat or say impact someone else? And that's what compassion is. And so if the answer is, oh, that's going to have a negative impact, then maybe I'll do something different. Oh, it's going to have a positive impact, then I'll amplify that. So for me, it does seem overwhelming, zero waste, plant-based, cruelty-free, all the things, right? But if you simplify it through that very simple lens of how is what I do, how can I make a positive impact? How can what I do have a positive impact on everything else? Because that's the point, is that we don't, there are no neutral actions. Everything we do does have an impact. The question we want to ask is, how can I have a positive impact? And so that's how I frame this book, and I hope it feels then less overwhelming and empowering. That's really the point.
Oh, that's beautifully described. And because I've read your book, I I think you've totally hit it. That there's just growth required of each of us to be able to live up to our potential and also to lift up this planet and lift up future generations. That's what you've been doing for all these years in your writing, in your wonderful podcast, and everything that you do. And now you're going to take people through a year of it. I love it. So I want to ask you, Colleen, as a dedicated vegan, how do you see the present moment, current climate? What I'm seeing, particularly on social media, is that the sort of default to, yeah, well, maybe I'm not vegan, but I know it's probably good, and certainly eating a lot of vegetables is good. And now I'm seeing beef and raw milk are natural, and all you vegans are eating all this other stuff, wimps. That just seems to have happened almost overnight. And how do we rise to this occasion?
Hmm. Well, it depends on whether we're advocates or just want to kind of do our thing. So I think either way, because I do think everyone's an advocate, because that word just means using our voice, comes from vocare, meaning use our voice. So as long as we are present in the world and not, kind of hiding in a closet, we are influencing people around us. So What does that mean? So I think we have to start with knowing how what we say and how we say it and how we present this way of living impacts other people. We have to know and decide want to be right, effective. And I don't think the same approach works for everybody. I think the same framing works for everybody. I think the different framing works in different mediums, in different contexts, in different relationships. And I think if we want to be effective advocates for compassion, then we have to know that and start there because I think there's a real temptation to say, but I want to use the word vegan. I want to say it this way because I want to get that out there. I want to demystify it. I want to represent. I don't want to, kowtow to people who don't like the word vegan. Well, okay, you can choose that path. How's it working for you? Or you can say, it seems like some people are more receptive to one approach over another, and maybe I have to pivot based on that fact. So I worry less about all of that noise out there. I mean, maybe I'm being naive, but I would say that, it's kind of like, you don't have a newscaster come up and say, everything's great, the weather's beautiful today, and I've got nothing to say. I mean, most of the kind of more provocative headlines are going to be what we see. And so, yeah, there's definitely a lot of noise out there around, raw milk and what have you. But what we also know is the facts remain the same, which is, more plants good, less meat better. And I think that's also a thing that a lot of vegans have to grapple with is I know there's a really strong ideology in the vegan movement that does not want to ask people to eat less meat. And yet the data show that people are more inclined to take baby steps. And the data show that actually, what is it? Everyone cutting down their meat consumption 2 days a week could have an impact that is so much greater than a few people, a small percentage of people becoming vegan. And I know that we don't want to face that because we know the positive effects and we know how great an impact if everyone went plant-based, if everyone went vegan would be. We know that. That's true. It is still true. And yet, how's it been working? It's not working. It's not working just saying to people, go vegan. It just doesn't work. And so that doesn't mean it's not, my message isn't still, the best you can do is completely eliminate animal products for all the things you care about. And that's true. And yet, if that's not going to be effective, then I'm not going to die on the hill of being right. I'd rather die on the
Mm.
hill of being effective.
Yes. And I love that you're looking at this completely through a compassionate lens, which is, of course, you. But it seems that in America, at least, a lot of people want to do this for their health. And what I'm finding is I don't really want to argue about the health anymore. And maybe that's because I'm not a physician, I'm not a dietitian, but people always want to go there. It's very interesting. In the UK, it's different. If you tell somebody in England that you're vegan, they're just like, oh, you must really love animals. And if you tell somebody in the US, then chances are you'll get, oh, you should meet my sister-in-law, she's gluten-free. And
Mhm.
it's just a different way that that's interpreted. But when you come at it as compassion, everything changes.
Yeah, I think so. I think so because that obviously translates to self-compassion as well.
Exactly.
So
Oh, this is so cool. Are you all already going to buy this book? A Year of Compassion. It comes out actually March 25th. We've had major technical difficulties with the Main Street Vegan podcast. And so I will do my best to get this posted prior to March 25th. I think I said May, I meant March. March 25th. Colleen's new book, A Year of Compassion. So in your book, you've got this umbrella approach, which I absolutely love because I think beneath this umbrella of compassion, so much can fit. We can meet people where they are. People can walk through various doors if not, they're not going to go through all of them today. And so, talk to us about some of the specific actions. You go from eating by color to reducing food waste to helping injured animals. So, Talk about the connection of these and how you bring people in on each of them.
Right. So the thread is, optimizing compassion. The thread is optimizing wellness, optimizing our treatment of other animals. And so through that, lens and with that thread, it's all connected. And that's really what I've always tried to do, Victoria, is I know it can be overwhelming for people if you think of all the things you have to do. And what I'm trying to say is start with the philosophy, start with the way you think about who you are and how you are in this world. And so it's not then such a huge leap to say, well, if I see myself as connected, if I see myself as wanting to make a positive impact, if I see myself as part of this world and not separate from it, right? Part of this natural world, not superior to it, then it's such an exciting, and maybe I'm just such a geek around this stuff. I find it so exciting. And I do think people like challenges. It's kind of one of the reasons I called, the 30-day vegan challenge, the 30-day vegan challenge, because people, I think, are looking for ways to make a difference, but they get overwhelmed with all the different things they have to do. And so that's what I want people to do. I talk about zero waste. You mentioned that that's obviously hard and overwhelming for people, and it is. I prefer the word zero waste, even though zero waste is not about being zero waste. It is about sustainability. Again, it is about kind of lightening our footprint on this earth. But the definition I talk about when it comes to zero waste, and it could be applied to all the things we're talking about here, is about responsibility and about value. And so, again, through that lens, then when we're making a decision about what we buy or, again, how we behave and what we eat, and then how we discard the things that we buy and eat and what have you, it's all through the lens of how can I be responsible for the thing that I've taken into my life? How can I see this thing and use it for the value for which it was made? And value also means use. So zero waste does not mean necessarily living minimally. It doesn't mean like getting rid of all your stuff. It doesn't mean going to buy a tiny home. It means how can I value what I have and how can I you know, make sure that I'm valuing what I bring into my life. So I don't know if that's too intricate an answer, but I'm trying to give people kind of a lens and a tool to use each time they're making a decision so that it feels very effortless and natural that you would eat by color because that's going to, obviously bring me as much optimal wellness as possible. It makes sense then I would have, some leashes and a towel and a box in my car just in case I happen upon an animal. It just makes sense then because it says how can I be responsible? How can I see myself as connected rather than separate from everything?
Oh, that's lovely. I want to just zero in on the zero waste again for a minute on some really practical things, because I have to say that that's been one of the harder things for me. All the stuff that has to do with animals, with the health, that this resonates so perfectly. There aren't any roadblocks, but I do stumble over some of the zero waste stuff. So tell me, what do you do about water?
Mm. Mm. Well, some of this is also depending on where you live, and if you live in an apartment, if you live in a, single home, single, residence, and it depends on where you live in the world, and it depends on what resources are available to you. I mean, this is all true, and I can only, account for so much, right? So water, I mean, well, water for me is an issue because we live in California, which is a drought-prone state, and so not everyone's going to be able to do this, but we did gray water our plumbing when we moved to this house. We've been in this house almost 13 years. And it's a very simple process. And it just basically means diverting the plumbing out to what we have as, a 60-gallon drummed 60-gallon bucket barrel. It's not a bucket, it's a barrel. And then we have that connected to a pump so that we can use that water to irrigate. Now not everyone's going to be able to do that, but if you can do that, it's pretty simple. And then you just basically have a valve so that you can divert it back to the city if you need to. So when we go away and we have people stay at our house, we don't want them to have to deal with, watering the garden every single day because with gray water, you do need to dump that barrel every day. We also have rain tanks. And so I know a lot of people might have even just a 60-gallon barrel for collecting rain from your gutter. That's pretty simple to do. We have 1,000 gallons just because we have a lot of garden and we had the space to put these three massive, 300-gallon tanks. And so everyone's different, but it, whatever we can do is what we can do. And we have to just be honest with ourselves. You said before, that, if it's about growth, it's about growth, but it's also just about self-honesty. How much am I willing to do? How much am I able to do? How much do I have the, ability to do? And so the water question is probably something where not a lot of people will do that. But I will say, if you are concerned about water, and I do believe that water is going to be one of the great wars of our
Yes.
future. I absolutely do believe that. I really believe Dune was, prescient. I think it's going to be a big, big issue, whether or not you live in a drought tolerant state, a drought prone state today. But if you are concerned about water, I would say this. Eliminate animal products. Or if you eat animal products and you're not able to do that right now, I would say start with those animal products that have the most impact on water, and that would start with beef and lamb. Those are the two that have the biggest impact in terms of water use. So if you care about water and you're not going to gray water or collect rainwater, then consider your consumption of meat.
I love how you've made that connection. That is so cool. How about packaging? When you do need to go out and buy something, groceries or whatever it is, nowadays most people aren't going out and buying it, which I just find as a city person, as someone who just loves, I'm here in Manhattan, and you just know that Macy's is there, but I don't think it's going to be there forever. People are ordering everything, and all that stuff comes in so much packaging. What do you tell people?
Right. And so, the first chapter in the book, as you will remember, is doing an audit because just like with the consumption of animal products, when it comes to our consumption of things, stuff, everyone says the same thing, which is, yeah, I don't really eat a lot. Yeah, I've cut down. Yeah, I'm zero waste. I recycle. We all have this perception of ourselves because we do want to believe that we are good people and we are good people. And when you do an audit, you actually realize how much stuff you bring into your world, how much, meat, dairy, and eggs you consume. So start with an audit so that you can at least know how much you are and where it's coming from. So is it coming from Amazon? Is it coming from places where you buy online? Is it coming from local? Is it plastic? Is it glass? Is it soft plastic? Is it hard plastic? These are the kinds of things. I know it sounds overwhelming in the beginning, but it is so empowering to know all of this information because then you can pivot and make decisions based on what is real and true as opposed to what is a bit more nebulous, right? So packaging is tricky and we have to, again, be self-honest. Are we choosing convenience over compassion? Is it easier for us to just buy something online? That might be the case sometimes, and that's okay sometimes. It's okay to want convenience. That's obviously, it's something we have to decide all the time, every purchase we make. If you are buying from Amazon, you can look at some options for things that you buy that do have, what is it called? There's a name for it when you're purchasing something where you can buy something that has less packaging. If you need something that you would normally buy on Amazon and you think maybe a neighbor would have it, listen, you might have delayed gratification where you go, I think I could borrow this instead of buy it. So there's less packaging, right? It's already in the world. What does that look like? Then there's the discard of that packaging. Okay, what does that look like? Am I in a place that has recycling? Well, if you are, glass is going to be the thing that's going to be the most recycled. Same with aluminum. Soft plastic, not so much. Hard plastic, find out what your rules are. So this isn't something, it was just like when you become vegan, right, Victoria? You know what to look for on the ingredients labels. And then once you don't have to look every single time because you know. So once you just know what the best things are in terms of purchase and discard, then it just becomes second nature as you're moving forward. So in the end, we're lucky enough to have a service called Ridwell. People can use a service like TerraCycle that tends to recycle the harder to recycle plastics. But if you don't have these services or don't want to take advantage of them, then okay, then what does it look like to buy things that have less packaging? So we just have to take responsibility for this. Like It's not the best definition of waste I have ever heard and that I use all the time is waste is anything for which the consumer stops taking responsibility. So if I have a banana and I have a banana peel at the end of eating that banana, that is not waste, that banana peel, until I stop taking responsibility for it and give it to someone else to take responsibility for it. So I put it in the garbage can. I'm expecting someone else to take responsibility for that thing. But if I can put it in a compost bin, if I can compost it myself, then I'm taking responsibility for that banana peel. So I know, long answer again, but again, it's about responsibility and it's about self-honesty.
That's a perfect answer. As I listen to you, I am reminded of the time where I really saw zero waste in action. In the 90s, I was doing some work with Tibetan refugees in Nepal and India. And in one of these camps in the Himalayas, in Himachal Pradesh in India, we were staying there, and I was so forced to look at my Western stuff because they had no trash can,
Hmm.
not even recycling, because there was no trash. So there was no need for a receptacle. So whenever I had used Kleenexes or water bottles or all these things that seemed important for being in that country at that time, I would have to put them back in my suitcase. They
Mhm.
actually had a cow who was not going to be killed, nor did they breed her and drink her milk. She was there because her dung was their fuel for the winter. So everything was used and reused, and it was the most beautiful image. So, for those of us over here who may be far away from something like that, can you give us, before we leave this zero waste portion, the first small step that somebody can take in that beautiful direction?
Well, I would say look at companies who are committed to that closed looped process, because that's what you're talking about. It's a closed loop, right? Our water, we take a shower in the morning, David and I, not together, but doesn't matter. We each take a shower, and then that shower water goes out into our barrel, and then we can water our plants with it. That's a closed loop process. Well, I'll give you an example of a company that's absolutely wonderful, vegan owned, sister owned, cruelty free, no testing on animals, and it's closed loop. And that's a company like Plain Products. So you buy your hair care products, shampoo, conditioner, body lotion, whatever it is, it's all in it's in metal reusable containers. When you're done, you send it back to them, they wash it, and they then put their products back in those bottles, and then they can send them back out again. That's a closed loop process. So I would say for the things that you feel like, oh, I can make a difference over there, I can make a change over there, I can change my shampoo, seek out the companies that are doing it as well, because there are more and more companies that are committed to this closed loop. So there's so many things we can do, and I think that's what's so exciting.
I love that. So, Plain Products, we will put them in the show notes at mainstreetvegan.com, along with all of the information about Colleen, this new book, her other books, her podcast. But that is such a cool thing. And that reminds me of how things used to be when I was a little kid. So we're talking the 1950s. And I remember that if you drank soda pop, that came in bottles and you paid a deposit and you took them back to the store. And we used to get pies from a particular restaurant, and they came in a pan. I don't know if it was aluminum or what. It wasn't that kind of flimsy aluminum that people throw away. It was an actual pan. And you paid a deposit, and it was a substantial enough deposit that you took it back to the restaurant. And it's so interesting that we were living that way before anybody was talking about any sort of environmental problems. And then we changed to something else, and now we've got plenty of environmental problems. But I love that closed loop idea and all these wonderful things that you're talking about. So let's move on from the environmental part more into your second element in your beautiful book, where we're talking about plant-based. So first I want to ask you about the term. Do
Mm.
you think people understand what it is?
I think people embrace that term more than they embrace the term vegan for people who are not vegetarian or vegan. I think I know there's a lot of nuance in the vegan community around, oh, that means people just think they could eat mostly plants, but not, still eat animals. Okay, well, that's probably true. You can't control how people understand a word. But I do think, in terms of people being able to embrace it themselves, because there's no ideology attached to it, I think people are more inclined to it. And I think that's why it's a word that I think we can use and not be so afraid of. But also, the reason I use it in the title, not only do I love the rhythm of the subtitle, I
It is a beautiful subtitle.
I do. I love the rhythm of it and rhymes a bit and et cetera. But I think also for me, I don't talk about food as being vegan. I talk about food as being plant-based. I'm vegan. The food I eat is plant-based because I don't see a banana being vegan. A banana is just a banana that is a plant. And I think the reason I do that, there's a lot of reasons I do it. One of which is because I think when we talk about food as vegan, it sounds like it's a separate food group. And I think it's really off-putting. And I think that's why we experience so many people saying, like, I don't really eat vegan. I'm like, yes, you do, because you eat apples, right? So we need to, I think, kind of take the ideology out of the words we use to refer to just fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and beans. Whenever we say, I had a vegan cake, a vegan meal, a vegan lunch, people just hear that as, oh, that's just something for vegans. So that's why I use that word. I just think people, again, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? I think people just embrace it more and see themselves as wanting to embrace plant-based versus vegan because that sounds too ideological.
Well, tell us one of your week's suggestions having to do with becoming more plant-based.
Well, I said one already regarding for sure the eating less meat. That is something we want to consider for sure. You mentioned eating by color. So what are some other things? I mean, one of the I think the biggest roadblocks for people, and I hear this all the time. You probably hear this all the time, which is I don't have time to chop vegetables. So this is what's so funny, right? This isn't, I mean, you should be chopping vegetables even if you're not vegan or plant-based. So I do give some thoughts about how to make it easier and how to make it fun. And again, we decide all the time if we want to spend time or if we want to spend money. Of course, it's convenient to go to the store and get vegetables that are already chopped in advance, right? This is where I kind of come up against, well, what are you solving for? If you were struggling with eating more plants and it's easier for you to get that, chopped up, whatever it is, salad or chopped up, squash, and that's going to come in packaging. But if you're having trouble eating more plants, I'd rather you just get the chopped up vegetables, right? So do that. And when you can be self-honest and say, I have more time this week, I can take the time to chop some vegetables, then I'll do that and I won't rely on the things that are already chopped up. So I guess the self-honesty is really coming up a lot, isn't it? Like we have to really know ourselves and we have to be willing to stretch ourselves because I think when people say I don't have time to chop vegetables, I think what's really true is they're not making time to chop vegetables. So do you have 10 minutes? I'm not talking about spending 3 hours in the kitchen. How about 10 minutes? How about when you're chopping an onion for a recipe that you're making that night, chop two onions and put one in a container in the refrigerator. You already have the cutting board out, you already have the knife out. So it's all about saying, what am I willing to do? What am I willing to do a little bit more of? And then make it enjoyable. Bring people in, bring your kids in, put a podcast on, can recommend some really good podcasts to listen to. So yeah, there's just a lot of things we can do to, don't do nothing because you can't do everything, just at least do something. And I would say chopping some vegetables in advance is one of those things we can do.
To chop vegetables or wash vegetables or otherwise deal with food from the earth, I think requires a certain state of mind. When I was binge eating, the idea of washing romaine was more intimidating than if somebody said you need to climb Everest tomorrow,
Mm.
because I just wasn't resonating with food that would be nurturing and healing for me. So I didn't want to mess with it, didn't want to touch it. And I feel like that we can help ourselves in so many ways to kind of raise our consciousness to the level where we want to chop vegetables or take the challenge of chopping vegetables as a way to raise our consciousness.
Mm, yeah.
I don't know that it's that fraught for everybody, but I certainly had a history of where that was just so obvious that I could measure the state of my character on a particular day by how willing I was to work with the produce.
Mm.
So let's talk about cruelty free. And do you have a week for us about cruelty free that maybe doesn't have to do with food, but what we do in some other way?
Oh gosh, there's so much. I mean, I just love those chapters so much. And a lot of it, again, I think a lot of what we're talking about here, Victoria, as we're chatting, I'm thinking one of those through lines really is self-honesty. I think another through line is preparation. And the preparation that I'm talking about for all of this is just in your mind. And you kind of touched on that a little bit about what you just shared. And so it is about some mental preparation. So that's something to consider, everybody. Just know that there might be something that you encounter. And so are you prepared for it mentally? And are you prepared for it physically? So one of the things I talk about when it comes to being prepared physically around animals and cruelty free is being prepared to have things in your car that you might need to help an animal in distress. And even if you don't have a car, so let's back up even from there, having phone numbers in your phone, in your contacts. How many of us have like come across an animal in distress or an animal who was hit by a car or a wild animal who doesn't look good and I don't know what to do and we don't know who to call and we scramble and we struggle and it can be really stressful. It's already stressful to see an animal in distress. And this is obviously anybody in distress, right? Having phone numbers in your phone for your wildlife rehab center, for your animal control, whatever, animal services, whatever it's called in your city, the shelter, knowing who to be able to call when you're in a crisis moment like that and not having to scramble to find the number is something I highly, highly recommend. And it has definitely helped me when I've been in these circumstances. And in terms of mental preparation, what I would say is, again, just knowing that we're connected with the rest of the world, that it's our problem if we encounter an animal, because we're all so busy and we want to say, well, someone else will take care of it. Not necessarily. So if we again look through the lens of compassion and interconnectedness, that we know when we go out, we may very well encounter an animal or anyone who needs our help, then we are not stressed or thrown off when we do encounter someone who needs our help. Then we're prepared for it mentally and we're prepared for it physically if all that we can do is call someone else to help us out. So yeah, that kind of preparation, knowing how we can intervene when we're called to do so.
What a wonderful world. I just had an image of going out on the streets here in New York City with the idea that everybody was prepared to help an animal, to help a person, to, I don't know, help a plant in distress. It just seems like if we could look at all of our fellow people and know that that was happening, how wonderful that would be. And since we see ourselves and everybody else, we can start to have that when we do it ourselves. So all the
Well,
more reason to get ourselves a copy of A Year of
ah.
Compassion and start doing some of this stuff.
I just
So
need to say, I just need to thank you for that. I got goosebumps when you said that. And literally, when we do those things, it's contagious. So people will see us. If you pick up a piece of trash and someone's behind you, they will see you do that. I mean, we have no idea the impact. We have so much power to inspire other people around us without even saying anything. So that image you just had that gave me goosebumps, that is precisely what we can create by just looking through the lens of compassion.
so beautiful. So Colleen, can you share a personal moment where compassion changed the course of conversation or relationship?
Mm, wow. So whenever I talk to someone, I do see them as being compassionate. So that does influence kind of every way I interact with the world. I will say something really personal. Those who follow me know that I've talked in the past about how I had a difficult relationship with my mother for many decades, a long time. And I struggled and I tried, and we both did all the time. And we would come together and then we would have conflict. It was just a real roller coaster. And I would be frustrated and, why can't she just be who I want her to be? And why can't she be the mother I want her to be? And that was the real shift for me, is when I stopped asking, why can't she be who I want her to be? And how do I want to be the daughter I want to be? It changed everything for me. Our relationship actually shifted completely, and we wound up having what came together again for the last 10 years, 15 years of her life before she died. So that to me is really kind of the summary of what it means to be compassionate, that it's not about what other people do and don't do. It's about what I do. It's about who I am. It's about how I want to show up in the world. And if that doesn't make you feel empowered and hopeful, I don't know what will, because we are in a time when everyone feels really hopeless and people are feeling really cynical and people just feel like no one else cares. Forget everybody else. Do you care? And if you care, then show up as if you do. And there's nothing else to say. You will create the world you want by just showing up and being compassionate.
That is beautiful. Wow. Wow. I just need a minute to breathe on that. That's so nice, Colleen. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So let's just do a kind of bullet round of practical ways that people can cultivate more compassion. One, two, three, or more.
Okay, so number one, see yourself as connected to everything else. Number two is it is not that we can make a difference, it's that we do make a difference. We have to decide if we want that difference to be negative or positive. And number three, plant more natives wherever you are. Plant more native plants. If you have a balcony, if you have a yard, if you have a garden, if you have a city you live in, get more native plants in the world so that we can support the animals who co-evolved with those plants. Those are the three things I would say as a quick takeaway.
Oh, those are wonderful. Wow. Thank you. So I know you as an innately compassionate person. And so many of my fellow vegans, they were weird kids. We were weird kids. We liked animals more than other people. We were bringing in the injured baby birds. We were I
Mhm.
mean, I remember I can't carry a tuna in a bucket, but I would go Christmas caroling for the animal shelter, and
Mhm.
people would give money to the animal shelter just so I would stop singing. And all these things that kind of made me a little bit odd. And a lot of the vegans that I know just have this long history of being maybe not vegan early on, but the kind of person who was destined to move in this direction. So is compassion innate or can it be learned?
Oh, I mean, compassion is 100% innate. So, one of the things I talk about in the early chapter is about Darwin and the misunderstanding that that compassion that compassion isn't part of this dog eat dog world, right? This is what we've come to know as social Darwinism, which is not what Darwin talked about. Darwin never even coined that term. It was someone many years later. So what's really wonderful and beautiful is what Darwin identified was that those species that demonstrated cooperation and compassion flourished and fared better than those who didn't. So compassion is absolutely an evolved trait. Now, that doesn't mean it's as strong, right, and top of mind for everyone as it is for someone else. And so those descriptions you gave, I think we can all identify with that. So it's already there. And I think this goes back to what I just said about when I talk to someone, I just presume they are compassionate. My job isn't to make someone more compassionate. My job is to strengthen and cultivate the compassion that's already there. So, how do we do that? Well, Victoria, I think some of it is meeting people where they're at. And if their compassion is about self-compassion and health and or their daughter or their son or the people right around them, because that's also something that we have to really admit is that we do have a lot of strong compassion for the people who are closest to us. And as we get farther away from that concentric circle and from that center, it is harder and harder to, to feel compassionate for those who live in this country or those who have a particular, political orientation, or for those who live in the world versus someone who's in our family, someone who's in our neighborhood. So we have to meet people where they're at. And what our job is to just really strengthen what's already there. So be curious, find out from people, what do they care about? What are their values? Where are they compassionate? How are they compassionate? And how can you strengthen what's already there as opposed to imposing upon the person you're talking to your values and where you're compassionate? Because the more you cultivate the compassion in other people, or help, people cultivate their own compassion, the more compassion we're going to have. But what we do, unfortunately, I think, is kind of impose our version of what compassion is supposed to look like. And that's where we're wrong again. So again, it's not about how other people are and whether they lack compassion or have compassion. It's really about how much compassion can we bring to the conversation, can we bring to the world. And what that does, inevitably, it's going to strengthen the compassion in somebody else. So I know that sounds again more nebulous than just, do this or say that. It is about the presumption that we're all compassionate and what we are conduits to cultivate the compassion that's already there. That's how I see it. That's how I see it, and that's what's worked for me.
No, I think you were spot on with that. So, everybody, as we come to a close, Colleen Patrick-Goudreau can be found at joyfulvegan.com. She's a regular contributor to National Public Radio. She hosts all-inclusive, luxury, sustainable, vegan, animal-friendly trips around the world. And she is host of one of the longest-running podcasts, Food for Thought. And all that, again, will be in the show notes at mainstreetvegan.com. I also want to do a shout out to the sponsor for this episode, and that is Complement. Complement supplements made by vegans for vegans. Their Complement Essential was one of the first vegan supplements that is specifically geared to what you could need a little extra of if you are eating a really good diet. Because so often we say, well, my diet's really good. Great. And then here's the little extra you need on top of that. And now they have other wonderful products, protein powders, all kinds of things. So if you're interested, have a look at lovecomplement.com. And if you choose to make a purchase, put Main Street in all capital letters in the discount box and get yourself 10% off. So, Colleen, final question. Gosh, this has gone so fast and been so much fun. How do you stay hopeful and inspired when the world can seem overwhelming?
How can I not? There are so many examples of people doing the right thing. And if we didn't think that were true, we would not get up in the morning. We have a long way to go, but the thing that keeps me hopeful is that I look at the things that are better than they were. The things that make me hopeful is looking back at history and seeing how things are better than they were. I would not want to live at any other time in history. And our job here now is to make things better than they are now so that people 100 years from now look back on now and say where they are in the future is better than we are today. So it's just keeping perspective. It's just keeping perspective. And that definitely helps me.
You are the hopeful, joyful vegan. So, what a pleasure. Thank you so much, Colleen. The book, again, is A Year of Compassion, 52 Weeks of Living Zero Waste, Plant-Based, and Cruelty-Free by the one, the only Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. Now, everybody, let's go out and make Main Street vegan.